I wanted to talk a little bit more about what I do, and some of you were even interested in the math. So let's talk the disturbing function. Basically, the disturbing function helps us describe the effect of adding mj to the system on mi, because mj is going to be affecting not only mi, but it's also going to be affecting the star a slight bit, and that effect on the star is also going to have then a follow-on effect on mi. And specifically for this case with planets, you can write it like this. The disturbing function can also be used to account for the fact that the star may not be a point mass, that is, it may not be perfectly spherical. The disturbing function might not look like that complicated of an equation, but it cannot be solved perfectly analytically, so we have to do various approximations of it, and those can get pretty unwieldy pretty fast. So this is an example of just one portion of the disturbing function, just to second order. And I recently did a paper where I went to fourth order in the disturbing function, and it was like literally pages and pages and pages for one function. It was a lot of fun. Today we were going a little bit farther out, but still within the Kuiper belt, to talk about our third dwarf planet, Haumea. Now, Haumea may not be as well known as some of the other dwarf planets and objects in our solar system, but it is a very interesting object in its own right, with its breakneck rotation speed, its weird ellipsoidal shape, and its ring and moon system, which is amazing. Now, Haumea is a relatively new addition to our knowledge of the solar system, having only been discovered back in 2003 or 2004, depending. Science drama for you. Yep, our brains are just not good at picturing this kind of stuff. So it's not that everything started at a center and expanded outwards. It's that everything was expanding. So it was like the space in between things was expanding everywhere, not just from a center. And so maybe it's easier to think about what it would look like if it did expand out from a center. Then if we looked in a certain direction, we would see a preferential expansion. We would be able to tell where the center of the universe was. For example, if you were looking straight towards the center, things would be expanding differently than if you were looking kind of perpendicular to the center. But we don't see that. In every direction we look, we see the exact same expansion. So if you think about it, we know that it can't be expanding out from a center because of what we see. But you know, even when I picture it in my head, I do kind of picture it as the center expanding outwards, but just know that's not actually what's physically happening. There's not a center of the universe that expanded outward. It's just everything's expanding. Everything's getting bigger. Why can't we see the center of the Milky Way, which is, after all, very bright? Dust! So when we talk about seeing, we're talking about visible or optical light. And dust is opaque at these wavelengths, and there's a lot of dust in the Milky Way, and so it shrouds the center of the Milky Way from our view. However, dust isn't opaque at every wavelength, and so using a wide variety of wavelengths, we can actually probe the very center of the Milky Way and see that beautiful bright center. Ooh, this is a really cool question. Okay, so the difference between a scientific law and a theory is basically a law is kind of stating something from empirical observations, right? So I've observed this to happen and I'm kind of describing what happens, whereas a theory kind of is getting more at the why of things. And so gravity is kind of a general term. So if you look at Newton's gravity, now that's a law. Newton's the law of gravity. He observed how things were working, he came up with a formula for it, and he said this is how things seem to work in nature. Whereas Einstein's theory is a theory. So general relativity is the theory of gravity and is kind of trying to describe the why, the how, like what the hell is going on with space-time. So yeah, gravity in a Newtonian sense, I guess, would be a law. And if you look at Einstein, it would be more of a theory. So hope that explains it. Did you know light's not the only thing that has a wavelength? You do too. So this actually comes back to the wave-particle duality of nature and something called the de Broglie wavelength. So de Broglie posited that not only did photons have both a particle and a wave nature, so did electrons and therefore all other types of matter. And he did this as part of his PhD thesis, if any of you out there want to feel a little inadequate about your own. So we talked last time briefly about how you can calculate the momentum of a photon based on its wavelength using the Planck's constant. However, you can invert that relationship, and so anything that has momentum you can calculate a wavelength for, and you and I have momentum as long as we're moving. So for example, for me, if I were out for a typical jog, I would have a wavelength of about 3 × 10⁻27 nanometers. Something that's kind of crazy about being a graduate student, and people tell you this, but I feel like until you experience it yourself, it's just really hard to wrap your head around, is that you might be the only person in the world who really knows about the project that you're working on. Like, yes, I have an advisor, and yes, my advisor is a tenured research professor at a R1 institution for a good reason, and he's smart as fuck. But like, this isn't his project. He really mostly knows about it from what I explained to him. And so if I do a bad job of explaining it, then he probably is just going to be lost as I am. And he has great ideas for helping me when I get stuck and giving me suggestions on things I might try to do. But at the end of the day, I'm the one that has to figure it out. Just me. And I don't fucking know what I'm doing. Wait a minute. Sound in space? Isn't this the kind of thing us astrophysicists are always complaining about sci-fi movies getting wrong? Well, yes and no. So sound isn't going to propagate in space in the sense that you would hear things. Like, no, sorry, you're not going to hear, or even see for that matter, lasers going pew pew pew, or hear explosions. Nothing like that. Not gonna happen. But sound is a pressure wave, and pressure waves can propagate through the interstellar medium and through the plasma of the solar system. So the speed of sound in this such environment is governed by this formula for the speed of sound in a plasma. Now, it's going to vary a bit because it's not totally homogeneous plasma that we have, but on average, the speed of sound within the solar system is going to be about 100 kilometers per second. Now, solar wind particles leave the sun at about 400 kilometers per second, so they are supersonic, but they slow down as they travel away from the sun, and eventually they become subsonic. And this creates a shock, which we call the termination shock, as part of the heliosphere. And basically, this is a discontinuity in pressure between the pressure interior to the shock and the pressure exterior to the shock. What happened with the International Space Station yesterday? Oh my gosh. So this is all part of the new Russian module Nauka, which launched last week. And immediately after launch, there was like a loss of telemetry. There was some issues with the propulsion control. The ground controllers in Moscow basically had to do these like correction maneuvers to get it back into the right orbit. They weren't sure they were going to have enough fuel, but it did make it to the space station yesterday. Then, however, the automatic docking failed, and so they had to manually dock with the space station, but phew, they finally successfully docked. Yay, all is good, right? Wrong. So hours after they successfully docked, there was a glitch in the software on board this module, and it started firing its thrusters just uncontrollably. And this basically caused a spacecraft emergency on the International Space Station, causing it to spin and putting it out of orientation. Communication was lost with the crew for a couple minutes at a time. Now, however, they were never in any danger, and if they were in danger, they could have evacuated on board a SpaceX module that was docked to the station at the time. But finally, they were able to shut down the thrusters on this module. They were able to regain control of the space station, and everything is good now, but wow, what a wild ride. So I graduated from my undergrad in 2009, and I studied at the Naval Academy, which means that I owed the Navy 5 years of service after I graduated, which I did. I was a surface nuclear warfare officer, so first I did a conventional tour out in San Diego on an amphibious ship, and then I went to nuke school, prototype. Once I was trained, went back to an aircraft carrier where they have nuclear reactors, and I worked basically as a division officer there. Then once I was done with that, I decided to get out of the Navy, just wasn't for me long term. And so then I started working at a consulting firm called Booz Allen Hamilton. Now they do a lot of government contracting, and I wanted to stay in San Diego. So I started basically working for SpaceTok, I think they renamed it, but at the time it was called SpaceTok, as a contractor via Booz Allen. Then I transferred internally to Charleston because I wanted to move. And then I decided I wanted to go back to school. And so that's what I did.